Masechet Taanit 27. We're analyzing the Mishnah, all about the ma'amadot, the representatives of Israel who will join along and be the representatives of the entire Jewish people, while the Kohanim are making the daily Korban Tamid and Musaf offerings for the community. So the Mishnah said, Elohen ma'amadot, and then it said, Lefi shene'emar savet b'nei Israel. And this is a curious transition. So we ask, Mai ka'amar? If you're saying these are the ma'amadot, and then you give a source for it. So you'd expect it to explain, these are the ma'amadot, and tell us what the ma'amadot are. So we're just wondering about that style of language. And the Gemara answers, Hachi ka'amar Elohen ma'amadot, u'ma ta'am tiknu ma'amadot. So these are the ma'amadot, what we're going to say in a minute after this paragraph. But first, before we explain what the ma'amadot are, we want to know what's the source and reason for which they decreed that there should be these non-Kohen representatives. It's because of because the pasuk says for Korban Tamid that you should command all of Bnei Israel, and they're going to offer it. And as Mishnah says, how can someone offer a sacrifice if he's not even there? I mean, actually, technically, you could send a messenger, right? Well, but that's exactly what we're doing. You need someone, a messenger, to be there to represent all those who are giving it. Therefore, you don't want to have an empty Bet HaMikdash, just the Kohanim doing something on behalf of people aren't there at all. So התקינו נביאים הראשונים 24 משמרות, על כל משמר ומשמר היה מעמד בירושלים, של כהנים, של לוויים ושל ישראלים. And therefore, the early prophets arranged for 24 different watches, and each of the watches had this ma'amad, the people standing there, the representatives in Jerusalem. So they were made up of Kohanim, Leviim, and Yisraelim. Which sounds from here like the Kohanim and Leviim would be serving, but also representing all other Kohanim and Leviim, and Yisraelim would be representing all of the rest of the tribes. As the Mishnah said, when it came time for their turn, so Kohanim and Leviim, they had to go to Jerusalem because they're actually serving, so they need to be in the Bet HaMikdash. Okay, so that's the Mishnah. Now we're going to see some Baraitot that are going to elaborate on it. Tenu Rabbanan, 24 משמרות בארץ ישראל ו12 ביריחו. There were 24 of these priestly families in Israel and 12 in Yericho. Now, this doesn't add up to 24. 12 ביריחו נפישין lehu tuba. No, that's going to be too many. That's going to be 36. So it has to be 24 altogether. What it means is that there's 24 in Israel in total, and 12 of them happen to live in Yericho. That was a city where a lot of Kohanim lived. When it was their time, half of the group would go from wherever they were in Israel to Jerusalem, and the other half would go from Yericho, so that the people that stayed behind, either in whatever city they were in Israel, including if there was one of the 12 from Yericho, they would stay home to provide water and food for those in Jerusalem. So you can't have everybody just leave because someone's got to take care of the farms and the supply chain. According to some opinions, they would switch off 3 days here and 3 days there so that everyone could serve. Shmuel says that you need the Kohanim and Leviim, or any Yisraelim, you need everyone there. And if you don't do that, the sacrifice is invalid. You need all of them to be there representing each of their groups. B'matnita Tana, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Kohanim u'Levim uchlei shir ma'akivin et hakorban. This is a baraita that's a little bit different, because now it says Kohanim and Leviim, and it adds also the instruments that they would play. It doesn't have Yisraelim. How come this one adds instruments? The question is, when they're singing, is the main thing that the vocals, the a cappella? So that would be the first opinion, that you need the Kohanim, the Levim there. Hopefully they'll bring their instruments, it'll make it nicer, but if they don't, it's okay too. And the second one says, no, the main thing of the main part of the song are the instruments, and then therefore it says you have to bring the instruments. The second one doesn't say Yisrael, but it's the same point. Yisrael also have to have some representatives there. Okay, Amadav Chama Bar Guria Amadav. Well, now we're going to see 3 baraitot that trace the history of these families. If you want to know what the families are, there's a list. Some old synagogues in the Galilee used to have a list of watches. They used to read them off throughout the year, even after the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed. And so these are the different names and cities that they were associated with. So this is really fascinating. And by the way, if you look in the back of some Sidurim, you'll see the reading of the Ma'amad is still there. And some people like to say this. Those sections from Parashat Bereshit. So this practice went on for a long time, and it has a long history. So let's see. This is the first now of tracing the history. This is the name of Rav. Moshe tiken lahem lisel shemona mishmarot. In the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, there was only 8 families of Kohanim. There weren't that many people, and they have to rotate, so they would serve more often. 4 Elazar, 4 Itamar, 2 of Aaron's sons who survived. So 4 from Elazar's family and 4 from Itamar's family. Eventually, they became more numerous, and there's more families. Shemuel v'Midan al 6 Esrei. Shemuel made them 16. David v'Midan al 24. And in David's time, they became 24. Right, during David's time is still the Mishkan, but he was preparing to transition over to the Bet HaMikdash, and that would be now more people are involved. Shene'emar b'shnat ha'arba'im l'malchut David nidrashu v'yimaseh behem giborei chayil be'yazer Gilad. This pasuk is from Devarim chapter 26. If you go and look there, you'll see that the 3 chapters from before list all family names of Kohanim and Leviim and all the people that served. And there here it says, in the 40th year of King David, they were sought for and they were found, the mighty men, meaning the people that are going to serve. Now, in the 40th year of David, Shemuel was already dead. And so therefore, there's 3 steps, according to Rav Chama Bar Guria in the name of Rav. Moshe had 8, then Shemuel made it 16, and David is the one that made it 24. Okay, so far so good. But now we have a second baraita that's a little bit different from the first. But we'll reconcile it, don't worry. Metive, Moshe tiken lahem l'Yisrael shemona mishmarot, 4 ben Elazar, 4 mitamar. That's the same so far. Moshe did 4 and 4. That's 8. Uba David Shemuel b'midan al 24. But here it says David and Shemuel, which sounds like they're working together, made it 24. So you see there's only 2 steps, 8 and then all the way to 24. Shenemar hema yisa David u'Shmuel haro'eh be'emunatam. And the pasuk that they quote is also Devarim a little bit earlier in the book. It says David and Shemuel ordained these offices. So how do we resolve this contradiction? And the answer is Hachi Kamad. Misodosh shel David u'Shmuel ramati ha'amidum al 24. What the second baraita means, and the pasuk that it quotes is through the ordination of David and Shlomo and Shemuel. Eventually, there were 24. But if you want, so this is more of a generality. If you want to know in particular how it came to be so, then you look at this baraita, and it was really 3 steps, and David is the one that finished it off to 24, but it was based on the expansion that Shemuel already made. All right, good. So we're able to reconcile those 2. And now we have another one that's going to be more difficult to reconcile. Tanya idach, Moshe tiken le'Yisrael 16 mishmarot. Shemone me Elazar u'Shmone me Itamar. According to this version, Moshe made 16. 8 from Elazar and 8 from Itamar. So you see, you can't reconcile this with the previous. And then the sons of Elazar grew more. They had more kids than Itamar. And so they had to get more shares, more clans, and more watches. So they split his 8 like when you split shares and you get double the amount of shares. So those 8 turned into 24 of Elazar, whereas Itamar remained the same and had only 8. Shneimad, Elazar Rabim, min bene Itamar. Again, in Devarim, in that section, this is in Pasuk 24, they went and they counted and they found that Elazar was more than the men of Itamar, vayachlikum, and therefore separated them, split them off, and doubled Elazar. Libnei Elazar Hashim lebet avot 16, libnei Tamar lebet avotam shemona. There you go. The pasuk says explicitly that was 16 and 4. Ve'omer bet av echad achuz leElazar ve'achuz leItamar. Okay, this it's adding another ve'omer. This paraita is adding another pasuk. We're going to add. What does this pasuk add? The meaning is that there was a father's house, a clan, taken for Elazar, and then has a doubled for Itamar. So this achuz means, I guess, proportionally. They're saying it means here for Itamar. Okay, so now my ve'omer, what does this pasuk add here that you're adding on to the braita? Maybe you'll think that just like Elazar grew, so too the family of Itamar grew. Maybe Itamar was originally 4, right? I mean, this braita says explicitly it was 8 and 8. But if you had only the Pisukim, and you might say, well, one grew more than the other, but maybe they both grew to some degree. And originally it was 4. Moshe had 4 and 4, and then it grew to 8 and 16. So you might have thought that. Therefore, the second pasuk comes and says, Tashema bet av echad achuz leElazar ve'achuz leItamar. Therefore, the second pasuk says that it's one father's house for Elazar, proportionally for Itamar, and proportionally their descendants were fewer, and therefore they didn't grow, and so you don't say that. And according to this, this would be a conclusive disproof against that first paraita that we had before, who starts with 4, because here it says that they didn't grow at all, not that they grew less proportionally, they don't grow at all. It started off with 8 and 8. Okay, so now what are they going to do with this? They have an answer to. Amar lach Rav Chama bar Guria Tanaehi v'anadam reki hay tanadam al Shimona. No, it's a machloket Tanaim, and I could follow the other braita, right? We saw he quotes a braita too, so he doesn't have to worry about that. Tanu Rabbanan arba mishmot alu min hagola ve'elu hen Yedaya Harim Pashchur ve'imer. Okay, all this that we saw so far was all talking about the first Bet HaMikdash, right? When David was preparing, and Shemuel and Moshe before that, Moshe at the Mishkan, and then the first Bet HaMikdash, they had those 24 families set out. However, when the first Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, and these families then went into exile to Bavel, only 4 came back to Eretz Israel for the rebuilding of the second Bet HaMikdash, which is not a very big percentage, right? 4 out of 24. It shows how they got comfortable in Bavel, and didn't come back, even though there was a thriving state of Israel. Hard to imagine, but that's what happened. Okay, so now what did they do? So the 4 that came back were Yedaya, Charim, Pashchun, Imer, and so the prophets that were there. This is the early prophets, the late prophets that were still around, like Haggai and Zechariah. They split them, and they made them in charge of all 24, right? So there's only 4 families, but all 4 families have to cover the watches of the 24 families that used to be there. So how they do that? They put down the names of the 24 watches on paper and put them into a lottery box. So Yedaya, the first family that came back, he took, of course, his own. He was one of the original 24 families, and he picked 5 more out of there. So he was in charge of 6 watches altogether. Charim did the same thing. They also took, and that way, those 4 families were in charge of everything. The other Kohanim that stayed in Bavel, that's it. They lost their chance. A couple of them did come back. So וכן ייתנו נביאים שביניהם שאפילו יהויריב ראש משמרת עולה Lo yidache yedaya bimkomo. And so then the Nevi'im said, should one of the other people come back, like Yehoyariv, and if he comes to Eretz Yisrael, makes Aliyah, he will not push away Yedaya, because Yedaya picked him, right? Yedaya took his own, and others, including Yehoyariv. Ela Yedaya ikar, Yehoyariv tafeh lo. Because Yehoyariv did not make Aliyah, at the right time and come and help out in the beginning of the Bet HaMikdash, he lost his place. If he comes back, he will still serve, but he'll be subordinate to Yedaya. He'll have to serve, at the end, wherever Yedaya will be the boss, and tell Yehoyariv where and when he can serve. All right. Okay, so now that was the Kohanim. Yisraelim, during that time, some Yisrael would be in Jerusalem, but they didn't all have to be. Whoever was not near Jerusalem, they would go to a Bet Knesset or assembly in their town and read the sections from Bereshit Perek Aleph. Mina hanemileh. What's the source? Why should they read that section? I want to read, I don't know, Parashat Shavua or something else. Amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha Amar Asi, Il Maleh Ma'amadot Lo Nitkayimu Shamayim Va'aretz Shneimar Vayomar Adonai Elohim B'ma Yada Ki Irashena. So the basic reason is because if not for the reading of these watches, the heavens and earth would not be fulfilled, would not continue. That we need someone constantly bringing the korbanot, and these are the people that are bringing them. And we derive this further from the conversation Abraham has at Brit Ben Abetarim. Abraham says, Hashem, how do I know that I'm going to inherit the land? And what he means is not only just personally, he means for long term, his descendants will continue to inherit the land. What's implied in this question is, maybe if Israel should ever sin, maybe you will wipe them out like you already did the generation of the flood or the generation of dispersion at Migdal Bavel. And so, right, so he wants to know not that he's going to just inherit the land short term, but that it will last for many generations, forever. Amad le'elav, Hashem says, no, I won't. Don't worry. Trust me. I'm not going to destroy them. And Abraham presses further and says, tell me, by what merit will we be able to inherit and have the land? Amar le kechali egla meshuleshet ve'ayz meshuleshet. And so Hashem says, take from me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old goat, a 3-year-old ram, and so on. And so while the immediate context there is talking about Brit Ben Abetarim, this Midrash is taking it as sacrifices in general. As long as you're doing, right, all these korbanot, these are our basic offerings showing our allegiance and our fundamental commitment every single day of the year. So that's why we read the Bereshit Aleph, because the whole foundation of the world is dependent on us doing that, right? You see it in this conversation. And if so, therefore, we're acknowledging, because of the korban that we are representing today, that's why the heavens and earth are continue to exist. Now we have a problem. Fine, that's fine when we have a temple. What about when it's destroyed? Now we don't have sacrifices. What are we going to do? Says, don't worry, I enacted the offerings, and as long as you read it, I'll make it as if you actually sacrificed it. You don't need to do the sacrifice. Hashem doesn't benefit. Hashem doesn't eat it or drink the blood that you're putting on there. It's just rather the idea of it that's important. And even by saying it, by praying on a regular basis in Shacharit and Mincha, we are showing that daily commitment, just the same as if we are actually making the korbanot. And therefore, and through that, I will pardon their transgressions, and that way the Berit will continue, and the Jewish people will continue, and the world will continue. And so don't worry about it. You have something, you have a replacement. All right, so that's why we mention the korbanot every day. Now next, another banan. Anshe mishmar היו מתפללים על קורבן אחיהם שיתקבל ברצון. The people of the mishmar would pray for the mishmar, meaning the other kohanim. Remember that the kohanim were split into mishmarot, and within each mishmar they divided them into 6, so that each day of the week only one group would serve on that day. So the other 5 groups would they're not doing they're not physically doing the sacrifice, so they would pray for their brothers that they would do everything correctly and that their offering would be accepted with favor. Now, the people of the Ma'ad, that's the Israel, when they gathered in Bet Knesset, they would fast for 4 days of the week. B'sheni, b'Shabbat, b'shlishi, b'arbe'i, b'chamishi, right? We said Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. B'sheni al yordei hayam, b'shlishi al holechei midbarot. Each day, they would have in mind a specific group. On Monday, they would say, for those who are traveling by sea, and that's dangerous. On Tuesday, for those who are traveling through the desert, and they're dangerous. We hope that they'll be safe. For Wednesday, right? It's for that children should not get a disease of croup. And b'chamishi al ubarot umenikot ubarot shelo yapidu menikot sheyeniku et benehem, for those who are pregnant, that they should not have a miscarriage, and for those who are nursing, that they will successfully nurse their infants. Okay, beautiful. They have different people in mind. Why each of these on different days? The commentaries offer various possible solutions, but none of them are quite convincing. They do seem to parallel the 4 things that we say Birkat HaGomel for, but it's not quite exact. Okay, anyway, ube'erev Shabbat lo hayu mitanin mipnei kivod Shabbat kal vachomer b'Shabbat atzma, and we don't fast on Friday because we want to enter into Shabbat, not when we're fasting and disheveled, but we want to enter into Shabbat in an honorable way, and certainly not on Shabbat when it's mitzvah to have oneg Shabbat and one is not allowed to fast. But why not on Sunday? Bechad b'Shabbat mai ta'ama la. Amar Rabbi Yochanan mipnei hanosrim. This is a fascinating reason, because Christians, they took Sunday to be their day of rest. And when the people are fasting, when the Jews, the Anshe Ma'amad are fasting, they're also not working. And so then their people are going to look at them and say, oh, I guess you turned, you're following Christianity. You're resting on Sunday. And so in order not to look like the people that do so, not to look like a Christian worshiper. Therefore, they said no fasting on Sunday at all. So this is only for polemical reasons. That's very interesting. Now, Rabbi Shmuel ben Nachmani Ma'amar, a different reason, because it's the 3rd day after a person is created. Now, we know that when someone undergoes surgery or gets an injury or something, the 3rd day of recovery is the most difficult day. We saw that from Brit Milah of Abraham and of Shem. So the 3rd day. Now, all the more so if someone's actually being created, that's, there's no surgery bigger than that. And so therefore, since mankind was created on Friday and then Shabbat Sunday, we feel weak. Now, that was true in the first day of creation, but it repeats itself every week. Right, we're always kind of created anew, bechol yom maaseh bereshit, and so therefore on Sundays we feel weak. We need to recover from being recreated on Friday. And the truth is, if you ask anyone who makes aliyah, the most difficult part of it is not having a Sunday, right, to rest. Sundays are just a regular work day in Israel. So you see from here so that's why they didn't fast on Sunday, because they're still feeling weak. Okay, that's a second reason. Another reason, is because of the extra soul that a person gets on Erev Shabbat and has with them over Shabbat. But then, b'mosei Shabbat notino tamimenu. When Shabbat is over, we lose that extra neshama. Shenemar Shabbat vayin nafash. Kevan Shabbat vai abeda nefesh. And we learn this from the pasuk. Says Shabbat. Once you finished resting on Shabbat, then vayin nafash, which they split into two words here, saying, "Whoa, my soul has gone." That's why we do besamim, so we can revive ourselves, not faint from losing that soul. You could also just learn it more simply. Vainafash, it means to sigh, right? To take a breath out, and with that breath after Shabbat, right, we lose that soul. Therefore, we feel weak after that, after enjoying so much on Shabbat and not having it on Sunday. So therefore, we can't fast on Sunday. All right. All this is very curious because if you remember in the Mishnah actually gave a reason why we don't fast on Sunday. This is the Mishnah according to the printed edition, the regular printed edition of Mishnah, going back to the first printed edition in Napoli, and the Mishnah that we have in the Talmud Bavli has all this that we just read. And then it says that we fast 4 days a year, and says not on the first, not on Sunday. So we don't make a sudden transition from rest and enjoyment to being tired and fasting, and then we will die because our bodies aren't used to it, and you can't go from one extreme to the other. So the Mishnah has a reason, and then the Gemara just ignores this Mishnah altogether and gives 3 completely different reasons. This is really, really curious, and I think it points to the possibility that maybe this part of the Mishnah, even though it's in our printed edition, was not in the original Mishnah. And first of all, it would read a lot more smoothly if you had that, because then it would say they would gather in their cities and read B'maaseh Bereshit, and right after that, what would they read? B'yom Harishon Bereshit v'Hirakia, and so on. And in fact, if you look at the oldest and best complete manuscript of the Mishnah, which is the manuscript owned by David Kaufman, it's in Budapest currently, and my son was about to go to Budapest before lockdown, and but they weren't going to let him see it anyway because of security and COVID reasons. Anyway, so if you see here, it says this is the beginning of the Perek, and you have they would all gather in and read Maaseh Bereshit, and then it says, what would they read? B'yom Harishon Bereshit, and it doesn't have that entire paragraph that I mentioned here. This entire paragraph is not part of the original Mishnah. There you go, and you don't find it in early sources. And already in the 1500s, the Tosafot Yom Tov, Rabbi Yom Tov Heller, a student of the Maharal Prague, noticed this and said, if you look in more exacting versions, lo garsinan min mutu, they don't have that paragraph. And so that paragraph was not original, was not found in front before the Amoraim in Bavel who wrote this sugya. We don't know where it comes from. It's not a braita anywhere. It's some commentary that someone made that somehow snuck into the later printed editions of the Mishnah and of the Talmud Bavli. All right, super interesting. And now we go on to the next. B'yom Harishon Bereshit v'Hirakia. Right, every day, where really it would make sense to on Yom Rishon we'd read what was created on Yom Rishon. On Yom Sheni, read what was created on Yom Sheni. But you don't have enough Pisukim that way. So therefore, we have to read 2 days. We have to read 2 days of creation every day of the week throughout history. So Tana Bereshit Bishnayim Yirakia Be'echad. And now when you do that, you have 3 aliyot. So whoever reads Bereshit that will be 2 aliyot. And then Yihirakia, the next paragraph will be 1 aliyah. Bishlama Yihirakia Be'echad Telata Pesukei Havu. Yihirakia, that second paragraph is 3 Pesukim. So it makes sense, 3 Pesukim, 1 aliyah. Every aliyah has to be at least 3 Pesukim. That's halakha till today. Ela Bereshit Bishnayim Mai Ta'ama Chamisha Pesukim Pesukei Havyan. But the first paragraph of Bereshit is 5 Pesukim. So then how will that help? You can't split 5 into 2 parts without having without having at least 3. So here I'll show you with this, right? The first paragraph So if we read only the first paragraph on Sunday, which is all we really need to read, there's only 5 Pesukim. There's no way to divide that into 3 people. So we add an extra one. Fine. The extra one, right? The third Aliyah will get 1, 2, 3 Pesukim. But the first one is only 5 Pesukim. You can't split 5 into 3 and 3. So how are we going to send two people for an Aliyah in one paragraph? Here's 2 solutions. Rav Amar Doleg. Ushmel Amar Posek. Rav says, Doleg means you skip backwards. You'll read Aleph, Bet, Gimel. That's the first Aliyah, and then you skip backwards, like we just did on Chanukah. No, Chanukah we didn't. Like we do in other times of the year, right? We do that. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll go back to 3, 3, 4, 5. That'll be the second Aliyah. That's what you do. According to Shemuel, you break it in the middle. You just say, period. That's it. Sof pasuk. And then the next Oleh will come and say, Vayhi Or. So each one is 2.5 pesukim. But we can repunctuate. Or maybe that's really short. Maybe it repunctuate somehow else and take this paragraph and add an extra sof pasuk somewhere in the middle. And that way you have 3 pesukim for each. Okay, so now why did they disagree with each other? Rav damar doleg, my tamar lo amar posek. How come Rav says you repeat a pasuk and not split it up? Kasavar kol pesuka de la pesake Moshe. Anan la paskinan le. This is any pasuk that Moshe did not put a sof pasuk there. We are not authorized to add extra punctuation, right? The punctuation is original. Although in the Sefer Torah and the original Torah, you didn't have any punctuation at all. That's part of the oral tradition of how to read it and where to put the ending of each pasuk. So we cannot add any on our own. That makes sense. Shemuel amar posek. Umi paskinan. Shemuel says you do add. Wait, can you do that? We have a story. Hamar Rabbi Chanina Kara. Rabbi Chanina, the Kara, the Bible expert. He was an expert in reading, and he would teach reading to kids. Sa'ad Gadol Hayali Eser Rabbi Chanina Hagadol, and he said he's another Chaninat. He's Chanina Kara, but Rabbi Chanina Hagadol, the great sage, says Lo hitir li lifsok ela litinokot shebet Rabban. Anytime if I wanted to stop in the middle, he wouldn't let me unless I'm teaching little kids, because they have to learn it. Sometimes it's a long pasuk. It's impossible to teach a kid. It's too long. You have to split it into small parts. That's a good educational technique. So we see from this that if at all possible, you're not supposed to add extra periods. Shmuel would say to that, well, in that case, why did he allow it for kids? Because it's impossible to teach if it's too long. Here also, it's impossible to send up two people for an aliyah if there's only 5 pisukim. There's no other way. So you're right. Ideally, we don't want to split pisukim and add more punctuation. But when we have no choice, we have to do it. Shmuel amar posek, my tamalo amar doleg. Now Shmuel, how come he doesn't agree with Rav and say just skip back and repeat a pasuk? It's because we're worried about people that come in late or leave early. If someone comes in late and so he sees them reading from pasuk gimel, he'll assume that the first aliyah was only 2 pesukim and think it's allowed. Or if someone comes in late and he hears or leaves, someone leaves after and he hears Aleph Bet Gimel and then he leaves, he'll assume, oh, the next aliyah is going to be only Dalet and He, and he'll think that the halacha is that you only need 2 pesukim, and then he'll go on to some village and read 2 pesukim. So we don't want people to think that, and that's why Shemuel does not agree with that version. All right, Metibe. Parasha shel shisha pesukim korin ota bishnayim v'shel chamisha beyachid. Hold on. Now we have an objection because this baraita says if you have a parasha that's 6 pesukim, 2 people could read it, but only 5 pesukim, 1 person has to read it. V'marishon koreh shelosha, hasheni koreh shenayim miparasha zo ve'echad miparasha acheret. And if the first person, if you have only 5 pesukim, and the first person reads 3, then the second oleh will read 2 from that paragraph, and he has to add another from the next paragraph. And some people say he has to add 3 more from the next paragraph. Because once we start a paragraph, you have to go into that paragraph at least 3 pesukim. Also, that's a halacha l'maaseh. Right, David? Right, we do that. Okay, we have a resident Baal Koreh here. Okay, so according to this, right, if you have a 3, then you should add, right, read the next 2 and then add another 1 or even another 3. But why would this Braita say that? If Rabbi Shemuel said that you can either repeat, or the other Shemuel says you can split another pasuk, so Rabbi Shemuel is questioned if you can do that. Then this Braita wouldn't say that you have to continue reading. No, that's different, because the second reader has space. We're talking about when you're reading the whole parasha. And so then you have many more paragraphs to read. So don't just read these last 2, right? Give space. You read the whole paragraph, read all 5. And if you didn't, and you only read, the first one only read 3 of 5, so the next one should continue into the next paragraph. And so therefore, anytime it's possible to read more, and don't repeat or split it up. But on those few times when, like in the Ma'amad, or a few times that we have in our year, we do it during on the reading on Purim. We do it, right, David? Right. It's only right. It's not enough pesukim. It's only 9 pesukim, and then we have to repeat to get 10. So, right. So we do it only when it's absolutely necessary. We go back and repeat. Oh, we do it on Rosh Chodesh, right? Rosh Chodesh, that the first paragraph, you have to go back 1 pasuk because it's not enough. And so this is the source for the readings of today, that everybody should have at least 3. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen ve'amen.